Hey, what's up guys, DP back here again with another raid video. Finally another video. I know I've been slacking a lot. I need more video ideas, put a list down, all that sort of thing. But today I'm going to be going over the new announcement of the fusion and the 22 new champions coming out. I'm going to go over each one of them, rate them for early, mid game, late game. And of course, as you see in the background, just me doing the Dark Elves tournament, which is questionable, but I don't have a 100% win rate because I don't want to be bothered to regear everyone. Anyway, let's get to the first champion here. You have, oh my lord, Quaystore, rare force attack champion from Metalords. His A1 is attacks one enemy, inflicts 30% extra crit damage if this champion has less than 50% HP. Attacks one enemy, places a 15% increased crit damage buff on all allies for 2 turns if this attack is critical. Attacks one enemy, has a 75% chance of removing 2 random buffs from the target. So A1, kind of weird. He's an attack champion, so he's gonna die really easily. So I guess he's always gonna be kind of low HP unless you have a healer. Okay, that's alright for a rare, I guess. It's A2. I'm guessing it's going to be booked to a 3-turn cooldown. That's, for a rare, that's pretty good. Because, he's going to crit. You build an attack champion to crit, right? And his A3. It's, this is a rare we're talking about. He's pretty good. He's a reskin of a Knight Errant. Though his A3 does have a 6-turn cooldown. Hoping that gets turned down to like a 4-turn cooldown. And maybe 100% chance booked. I don't know, it's a rare, so you can't expect too much. But early game, I can see him being used for like a clan boss for his A2. A3 is just probably just a really hard hitter, and A1 is again clan boss sort of thing, I guess. Early clan boss team, not crazy for progression early game, I'd say, because he doesn't have any AoEs. Mid game, I wouldn't see really any usage for him unless you're literally out of luck and you need that crit damage on everyone. Yeah, I'd give him overall for a rare, I'd give him like a 6 out of 10. Not bad, not amazing. But let's go on to our second champion here with Solaris, another force rare attack from Sacred Order this time. Attacks one enemy, has a 30% chance of removing 1 random buff from the target. Kinda weird. Attacks one enemy, places a shield buff on this champion equal to 20% of the damage inflicted for 2 turns. Now that could potentially be very good, depending on how hard he can hit. Attacks one enemy, has a 75% chance of placing a stun debuff for 1 turn. It's okay, I guess. Now, we're gonna see him being used. Faction Wars. Faction Wars, early game like dungeons, I guess. I wouldn't really see him used for clan boss. Early game I'd probably give him like decent use. Mid game probably for Faction Wars, and end game I wouldn't really see any use for him apart from if you're lacking in Sacred Order and you need the stun and shield. But apart from that, probably give him like an overall score of 4, maybe 5, probably like a mid 4. You go to our next rare, Purgador. I have no idea. Attacks one. Oh wait, no, sorry. He's a magic attack champion from Sacred Order. Attack one enemy 2 times, will ignore shield buffs. That's pretty good for an A1 on a rare. Attacks all enemies, inflicts 10% extra crit damage for each debuff on this champion. Stacks up to 50%. That was looking good until it said for each debuff on this champion. That's kind of meh. Attacks one enemy, decreases the target's max HP by 20% of the damage inflicted. That's pretty meh. Early game, I could see him as a bit of like a damage dealer for the A1 if you're running against shield people. His A2 sounded great until the very end. It's kind of useless in my opinion. Because if you have a bunch of debuffs, you're probably gonna die, or you have attack down, and his A3 is pretty much useless. So, you know, early game, I wouldn't see much use from him apart from A1. Mid game, I wouldn't see him have any use. Late game, of course, no use at all. Overall score, probably give him like a 2 to 3 out of 10. That's really vault material right there. A Spirit Affinity attack type champion from Sugarwall attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 10% chance of placing a feat debuff for 1 turn. I mean, it's kind of random. Attacks all enemies, has 30% chance of placing 100% heal reduction debuff for 2 turns. I mean, it's an AoE, could potentially hit hard, but the heal reduction, 30% chance. Inflicts 15% more damage to targets under healed. Okay, so that's a passive. 15% more damage when there's heal reduction. Okay, so I mean, you have to do is A1 then. Early game, I'd see a bit of a use, maybe a bit of a damage dealer, and for what do you call it? The green dungeon, green affinity Persian dungeon boss, whatever you want to call it, that heals. Useful there, but apart from that, I don't really see him a use in mid game or end game. Pretty much a vault there. So overall score, I'll probably give him like a 4 because he's actually useful for early game, I'd say. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. Renouncer, a force attack champion from the Sacred Order. His A1 is just attack one enemy 2 times, nothing. Removes 1 random debuff from this champion, then attacks 1 enemy. Heals this champion by 25% of the damage inflicted. That's pretty bog. Built-in lifesteal, basically. Attacks 1 enemy, places 15% increased speed buff on all allies for 2 turns if this attack kills an enemy. Unless it hit hard, so it's going to be pretty useless. Early game, I could see him as like, give him a HP chest piece, crit rate gloves, so he's like, he can deal damage but be a bit tanky at the same time, and just heal back the damage. Though you'd probably still put him in lifesteal overall, because his A2's on a 4 turn cooldown, maybe 3 turn if it's booked. I mean, not crazy, not that good either. Mid game, I wouldn't see him used at all. Same for late game. Honestly, I'd probably give him like a 4 as well, a low 4 out of 10. And moving on to the next one, we have Sanctum Protector. He looks pretty cool from the thumbnail thing. Spirit Defense Champion from the Sacred Order. Attacks 1 enemy, has a 50% chance of placing a stun debuff for 1 turn. Pretty good. Hopefully it's booked to like 25% chance. Then we have attacks all enemies, then places a 30% increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns when ascended. Only on himself when non-ascended. That's actually pretty good. An AoE on a defense-based champion that gives himself defense up, but it's after the hit. But that's still pretty good per rare. And then we have attacks 1 enemy, has a 70% chance of placing a provoked debuff for 1 turn. Sure. I mean, I think Templar has like a 4 random hit with a provoke and a block damage. So I guess you're getting a worse version of that, but you're getting an AoE skill with decreased defense. I mean, increased defense on himself and everyone else. I mean, early game, actually he'd be pretty good early game. The stun will help out. The AoE with increased defense will help out with damage and tanking. And then the provoke debuff, that's pretty good. Early game, yep. Mid game, he might have some sort of use if you're lacking, especially in like faction wars. Then end game, you need to tell me what's even end game is if you're somehow lacking in Sacred Order like I was. But overall score, I'd probably give him like for a rare, probably 6 or 7 to be honest. Probably stick with a 7 there. Yeah, that's pretty good. We move on to the next one. Draconics. Avoid HP in the Sacred Order. Attacks 1 enemy, heals the ally with the lowest HP by 7.5% of the damage inflicted. Okay, sure. And we have places a shield buff on all allies equal to 50% of this champion's max HP for 2 turns. Okay. That's pretty good for a rare, damn. Then you have attacks one enemy, removes all debuffs from the ally with the lowest HP, it then heals them by 25% of damage inflicted. So this is like a damage healer, really. He's pretty darn good. Early game, he'd be very useful, I think, for keeping everyone alive. Mid game, same thing really. If you're still progressing in the high dungeons, you probably could use him for the heals and the shield. And then end game, potential use in Sacred Order, since all the healing and stuff, if you don't have like the legendaries like I did again. But yeah, he's pretty darn good. I'll probably give him 7, 8 out of 10. We move on here to Drowned Blood Wraith. Damn, that's a weird name. Avoid attack in the Undead Horde, sorry. Attacks one enemy, has a 15% chance of placing a stun debuff for one turn. The chance of placing a stun debuff increases by 5% for each debuff on the target. That is potential for an A1. If attacks all enemies, has an 85% chance of placing a 30% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Also a 25% chance of placing a fear debuff for 1 turn on enemies under decreased defense debuff. Okay, yeah, there's a bit of synergy there. It's the small decreased defense, but that's pretty good overall. Then we have heals this champion by 50% of their max HP every time this champion or an ally kills an enemy. Okay, attack champion, but has heals? Yeah, sure. It's pretty good early game. I mean, keep him alive really, just by killing things. Yeah, I'd see him having quite a bit of use in early game. Mid game, I'd see him have a bit of use as well, in like dungeons for progression. Though end game, I don't really see him used in maybe Faction Wars end game, but they have so many good champions. It'd probably be hard to slot them in. But I give him like a good 6, 7 out of 10 there. Probably a 6. Alright. Champion at number 9. Wagonbane. Interesting name. A magic support in Ogre tribes. Attacks one enemy. Has a 35% chance of placing a 50% decrease active for 2 turns. I mean, sure. Attacks one enemy. Places a 7.5% continuous heal buff on the ally with the lowest HP for 2 turns. Okay, I mean, that guy had it on as A1. But yeah, alright. Then we have attacks one enemy, has a 75% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Also, a 75% chance of decreasing the target's turn meter by 15%. Good for clan boss. Except for the turn meter. Yeah, I'd see him get a bit of a use in clan boss. Yeah, early game, definitely. Progressing, I'd see him a bit of use with the A3 there. A2 could potentially help, though it's kind of, I don't know. A2 is a bit meh. A1 could potentially help though, if you don't want to resist. Mid game, I wouldn't really see him have any use though, especially end game as well. No use really. I'd probably give him like a 4 out of 10. Probably just like early game really. And moving on, we go to Ripperfest, a void attack from the orcs. Looks like a Gaelic's father or something. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 30% chance of placing a 25% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. Okay. It's a void though. A void with a small decrease attack on his A1 doesn't I can't remember his name. Another orc has that like same skill on his A1. Okay. And he's also void. Okay, attacks one enemy 3 times. Each hit places a 100% heal reduction debuff for 2 turns. Each hit places it? Okay. If this champion has full HP, each hit places a 50% heal reduction debuff for 2 turns if the champion has less than 100% HP. Okay, that's really weird. That skill's like just for the green potion dungeon on that skill. Alright, now we have a passive. Places a 25% increased attack buff on this champion for 1 turn and decreases the cooldown of Flip to Shred skill, which is Rip to Shred skill, which is A2. Every time this champion HP drop below 50%. I mean that okay. So gets hit, can do his A2 quicker, probably deals quite a bit of damage. Yeah, I mean early game I don't really see use apart from an A1 attack down for beginners. Mid game, I wouldn't see much use at all, apart from like maybe Green Potion Dungeon. End game would be probably completely useless. So I'd probably give him a 4. Sorry, a 4 out of 10 there. Just again, an early game champion. Let me go on to the next one. Wyvernbane, Spirit Affinity attack in the Orcs. Attacks one enemy, has a 20% chance of placing a 15% decrease speed debuff for 2 turns. I mean, sure. Attacks one enemy, has a 35% chance of decreasing the target's turn meter by 20%. Really RNG on that, jeez. We have attacks one enemy, has a 75% chance of placing a HP debuff for 2 turns. This is bad. This is a bad champion, apart from maybe the A2 for like a Faction Wars boss, and the A1, that's about it. Honestly, early game, Faction Wars boss, maybe. Mid game, Faction Wars boss, maybe. End game, useless. I'm gonna give it like a 3. Because early game, just like Faction Wars, could help with Faction Wars, that's about it. Solid 3, I'd say. And move on to number 14 here. Jhin Strider. Magic attack from the Barbarians. Attacks of one enemy, has a 30% chance of placing a 30% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Okay, so we got a A1 decreased defense. Attacks 3 times at random. Each critical hit decreases the target's turn meter by 10%. Will only decrease the turn meter once per target. Pretty RNG, and if it hits one person 3 times, it's pretty useless, apart from the damage. Then we have attacks all enemies, then attacks the enemy with the lowest HP. Has a 75% chance of placing a 100% heal reduction debuff on the enemy with the lowest HP 2 turns. You'd hope they'd be dead. I mean, it's like a Foley, not even a mini Foley. This is like a tiny Foley right here. Yeah, I'd see that for Green Potion Dungeon. Mid game, maybe a bit of dungeons overall. Early game, probably like Clan Boss, I'd say. Clan Boss for the A1 and the A3. With the damage dealing, of course. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'll probably give her like a 5 or a 4. A 5 out of 10 overall. I mean, it's not horrible. I go to the next one. Dilgo. Avoid attack in the Dwarves. Attacks one enemy. Has a 40% chance of placing a 15% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. Again with a random, like, that's kind of useless. Attacks all enemies 2 times. Each hit has a 50% chance of placing a 50% decreased accuracy debuff for 2 turns. That's pretty good. That's an AoE too. And it's 2 hits. Okay, that's really good. Then we have attacks one enemy 3 times. Each hit has a 40% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Also very good. If it's like Clan Boss, so early game, I'd see him have very good use for Clan Boss in dungeons for progression. Mid game, I'd still see him used as a dungeon and Clan Boss champion potentially. But end game, I wouldn't see like any use for him except for maybe Faction Wars. I would give him a solid 6 out of 10. And moving on. Dolor Lorekeeper. A lot of Banes. We had a lot of skulls and now we got a lot of Banes. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 30% chance of placing a 30% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Okay, so very good Clan Boss champion there in the beginning if you don't have a decreased defense. Attacks one enemy. Damage increases by 5% for each debuff on the target. That's a Clan Boss. Attacks one enemy. Places a 15% increased crit rate buff on all allies for 2 turns if this attack is critical. Again, you know, Clan Boss or like maybe Arena for low end Arena. And then increase ally resist in all battles by 30. Okay, so very good early game for the A1, A2, and A3. Mid game, still again potential Clan Boss champion there for both the decreased defense and damage because of all the debuffs on the A2. End game, I wouldn't see much of a use really though at all. Again, end game people don't really use rares because you know the lower end skills, but I give him for a rare a solid 7 there. A1, A2 really good. Go to our next champion. Dolor Lorekeeper. a full support in the Dwarves. Attacks one enemy, 25% chance of placing a block cooldown skills debuff for one turn. That's actually really good for a rare. Low chance, sort of. Probably booked like 35%, but like block cooldown skills, that could be really good for faction wars or like a dungeon progression for early game. Attacks one enemy, has a 40% chance of placing a stun debuff for one turn if the target is under any debuff. Okay, sure. That's actually pretty good. Like, you always put debuffs on people. Then we have places a 50% continuous heal buff on all others for 2 turns. Also places a block debuff buff on the target ally for 1 turn if they have less than 100% HP. And then we have a 15% HP in all battles aura. Okay, so I'd say very good for dungeon progression. Not very good in clan boss. I'd say like a dungeon guy, like a really good dungeon support for rares, which is good for early game. Mid game, he sort of drops off, and then end game, of course, he just completely drops off. Probably gives this guy like a 5 out of 10, maybe 6. And then moving on. Avaria, the Alchemage, and magic support in the Dwarves. Attacks one enemy, has a 30% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. Okay, it's pretty good A1. Attacks all enemies, has a 50% chance of placing a 25% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. Also places a 15% decreased speed debuff for 1 turn on targets under poison debuffs. Okay. The first part's good, the second part's kinda meh. Fills the turn meters of all allies by 15% and heals all allies by 15% of his champions max HP. Okay. If he has high base speed, he could be used as a turn meter booster, kind of like Apothecary. So early game, I'd say he's pretty darn good. By the way, so if you hear any noises outside, there's arguments. I'd say he's good in both early game clan boss, early game arena, and early game dungeons. He's like an all-rounder, which is really good for early game. Mid game, I'd still see him get some sort of use in arena, clan boss, and dungeons. And then end game, maybe faction wars. Yeah, I give him like a solid 7 out of 10. Maybe a close 8 out of 10 actually for a rare. Yeah, I'll give him an 8. He's pretty good. Alrighty, now we move on to the epics. First off, we have Tuhak of the Wanderer. Void attack in the orcs. Attacks with one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 30% chance of increasing the cooldown of one of the target skills by 1 turn at random. Increases the cooldowns of all targets skills by 1 turn instead, if this champion has less than 50% HP when attacking on each hit. Okay, that's an A1. That's a interesting A1 though. Attacks all enemies, has a 75% chance of placing a 30% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. Also places a 30% increased speed buff on all champions for 2 turns. On this champion for 2 turns, sorry. Heals this champion by 15% of the damage inflicted if they have less than 50% HP when attacking. Alright. Yeah, this guy's got a lot. Attacks one enemy, steals 50% of the target's turn meter. Hang on, I need to make this bigger. There we go. Attacks one enemy, steals 50% of the target's turn meter. Has a 75% chance of placing a stun debuff for 2 turns. Steals 100% of the target's turn meter if this champion has less than 50% HP. So you want this guy to be low on HP really. Decreases the damage taken by this champion by 20% when their HP drops below 60%. And then 22% aura in all battles. This guy is kind of loaded. He's an epic though. Okay, so A1 is pretty darn good. A2 mixed. A3 is pretty darn good. And then the passive is interesting. Kind of he gets tankier the lower he goes and better the lower HP he goes. But for an attack he gets killed so easily. But early game I'd say he's pretty darn good for like progression overall, not really clan boss, but everywhere else pretty darn good. Mid game, chance to be some sort of nuker on his A2 for arena. Again, dungeons, not clan boss. End game, I could see pretty darn good use in faction wars for the boss. The A3 in the passive. That'll be coming really, really good handy. Yeah, for an epic, I'll give him like a solid 7 there. He's got a loaded kit. Move on to the next one. I gotta make this one bigger again. Baros of the Blood-Soaked. Kinda looks like a budget Angar or Grak in terms of the picture. Attacks one enemy 2 times. The first, it has a 20% chance of filling this champion's turn meter by 10%. The second hit has a 20% chance of decreasing the target's turn meter by 10%. Okay, interesting one. Attacks one enemy 2 times. The first hit places a shield equal to 25% of the damage inflicted on all allies for 2 turns. Oh wow. The second hit heals all allies by 10% of the damage inflicted. Okay, so it's 2 hits, so the shield isn't going to be crazy because it's a 2-hitter and it only counts the first hit, which means, again, if he hits really hard, that could still give a really good shield. I like that skill. That's really good. Alright, now we have attacks of one enemy 2 times. The first hit has a 75% chance of placing a 50% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns, and a 75% chance of removing any increased attack buff from the target. The second hit, that's kind of weird wording. The second hit has a 75% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns, and a 75% chance of removing any increased defense debuff from the target. What? This is a... I'm gonna process this, man. This guy's got such an interesting kit. I like it a lot. A3, yeah. It's pretty good. There's only one enemy. Early game, very good. You can have a damage dealer while also having a bit of a healer with the healing on the shield. Mid game, again, very good dungeons, a very good potential faction wars as well. End game, I'd also see faction wars as well. That's pretty good, man. For an epic, and not even a void epic, I'd give him like a solid 7 to 8 there. It's pretty good. But I'm moving on to Feign. Let's make this bigger. Spirit attack in Skinwalkers. Attacks with one enemy 2 times. Each hit has 35% chance of stealing 5% of the target's turn meter. That's kind of pointless. Attacks with one enemy has a 75% chance of placing 2 5% poison debuffs and a 50% decrease attack debuff for 2 turns. Okay. That's like, if you have a speed team for clan boss, book her down to probably 3 turns. Really, really good skill there. It's like a baby Draco. We have a attacks one enemy 3 times. The first hit has a 75% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 3 turns. The second hit has a 75% chance of placing a 25% weakened debuff for 3 turns. The third hit heals the champion by 4% of the max HP for every debuff on the target. Jeez, okay. So it's literally like a baby Draco morph. This is really good. Really good for clan boss. Really good debuff of single targets like bosses and dungeons. Early game would be amazing for clan boss and dungeons and progression. Mid game, again, really good for clan boss and dungeons. End game, if you don't have like a proper poisoner or like a proper debuffer like Rausen, you could slot her in easily. Even if you had Rausen but a Draco, put in her and Rausen, 100% uptime. Hopefully if it's booked 100% on decreased defense and weaken. Yeah. Give her a solid 9 there. For an epic, that's a solid 9. Or a high 8, a really high 8. And then we have Caden. He looks pretty cool. Reminds me of like a manta ray. A magic defense in Dark Elves. Attacks one enemy, has a 15% chance of placing a provoke debuff for 1 turn. Yeah. Kinda meh for an epic. Attacks all enemies, has a 75% chance of placing a 50% decrease attack debuff for 2 turns. Good for faction wars. Ascended. Revives 2 random allies with 50% HP and places no spaces there, feels bad. And a 60% increased debuff on them for 1 turn. Okay, so this was a faction wars champion. Early game could potentially be really, early game could be really good for progression for the AoE. He's defense based, has an AoE with decreased attack, and a revive. His A1's pretty bad though, but the A2 and A3 make up for that. Mid game, again, faction wars dungeons, pretty good. Maybe even arena on the A2, depending on how hard he hits. End game, I could see him in faction wars still. And I'd probably give him like a 7. The A1 brings him down, but the A2 and A3 are pretty good. Actually, between like a 7.5. Give him a 7.5. And we have 2 more left here. We have the first one, which is a legendary Ursuga Warcaller, avoid legendary HP in barbarians, because they need more legendaries, right? Attacks one enemy, 45% chance of placing a block cooldown skills for 1 turn. Okay, that's pretty good for faction wars, or maybe RNG on an arena. Attacks all enemies, places a 30% decreased crit damage debuff and a 50% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns on targets whose attack is higher than the defense. Okay, this is good. Places a 30% decreased speed debuff and a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns on the targets whose attack is equal to or lower than the defense. Oh wow. Okay, that's really good if you can give her accuracy, and she's a HP champion too. Places a 50% ally protection buff on all allies except this champion for 2 turns. Places a 25% strength and buff on this champion for 2 turns. Book to a 3-turn cooldown. Hopefully. Probably, yeah. Man, that's pretty good. Decreases the damage of all allies received from critical hits by 30%. This champion will receive the damage instead. Arena. Oh man. Oh no, Stalwart plus this. Oh man. Okay, increase ally HP in all battles by 33%. This is straight up like tank team arena. If I pull her, she's going straight into my tank team arena team. Now if you pulled her early game, crazy good for progression. Amazing for progression. A2, A3, really good. You could even put her in an arena for her passive because people will do almost no damage to you. Mid-game, again, dungeons, clan boss, faction wars, arena. Endgame, faction wars, and arena. Potentially clan boss too. I mean, you'd expect her to be really good. She's void. Probably give her, for a void legendary, give her an 8. Now, that might be like, oh, but it's not a 9 or 10. For a void legendary, that's really good. An 8 out of 10 is really good. And then finally, we go to the fusion legendary that's coming in on Monday. Carr. No idea how to say his name. He looks kind of good from the picture. Spirit support in a lizardman. Attacks one enemy. 35% chance of placing a stun debuff for 1 turn. The chance increases by 15% for each buff on the target. So it's a go second type of situation. Okay. Removes all provoke debuffs and 1 random debuff from all allies. Places a 60% increased defense buff for 2 turns on all allies who have debuffs removed. And also places a shield buff on all allies equal to 20% of this champion's max HP for 2 turns. Okay. Again, go second, get rewarded. Okay, that's really good. Attacks all enemies. Removes 1 random buff from each enemy. Has a 75% chance of removing 2 random buffs from each enemy. Places a 100% block heal debuff for 3 turns on enemies who have 1 or more buffs removed. Also places a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns on enemies who have 2 buffs removed. Again, go second to get rewarded. That's pretty good. Decreased defense as well. And he's got a passive, immune to provoke debuffs. Fills this champion's turn meter by 20% each time an enemy attempts to place a provoke on this champion. 4-turn cooldown, probably 3 2-turn cooldown when booked. That's again really good. Increase ally resist in all battles by 55. That's a pretty average aura, I'd say, for resist. But again, this is screaming tank team in arena. If you get this guy early game, easy clap. You could progress a lot with this guy. Mid game, dungeons, arena. If you want to make, if you don't have enough speed, build this guy to go second. Build your other teammates to go second, and you're set. And end game is just gonna be straight tank team. I'm gonna definitely be trying to slot this guy in my tank team. I have 3 lizards. I have Rousen, Skull and this guy. It's gonna be pretty pog. Overall, for legendary, I'd give him like a 7 out of 10, maybe close to an 8. And for a fusion, I'd give him an 8. He's really good fusion, like a lot better than the other ones we've had. I actually can't wait to get this guy. I want it to be Monday so I can just kid him out. But yeah, most of these champions are actually pretty good, though some of the rare ones are pretty. This should be uncommons, to be honest. But very long video, almost 40 minutes. My voice is really hurting now. Hope you guys didn't fall asleep listening to this. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you guys pull these champions. Hope you can do the fusion. Wish you good luck. And with that, if you would like to subscribe, then feel free to like the video if you liked it. I sometimes stream on Twitch on twitch.tv/thedragonforce. I don't have a schedule. I want to keep streaming, but if you want to see me live, I'll be there. And with that, I say adios.